Okay, what is up there, YouTube? This is J-Man Time, and today I have a video on Cuba's secret submarine fleet. Many of you don't know, but Cuba has actually developed some of their own indigenously designed submarines to combat any potential threat from the U.S. Navy. Now, since the Cold War era, Cuba has maintained a small fleet of submarines, at least for most of the last 40 to 50 years. Now, in the Cold War, in the 1970s and 80s, the Soviet Union actually sold Cuba 3 Foxtrot class of medium submarines, and these were used by the Cuban Navy up until the 1990s. Those were later decommissioned and sold for scrap. But in the late 2000s, Cuba began to design and manufacture some of their own rare and mysterious submarines that have appeared in many photos but weren't unveiled until 2021, or at least the Cuban government didn't admit they existed until 2021. So let's go over some of the rare Cuban-made submarines and submarine-like vessels that have been designed by Cuba over the last decade or so. And the first class of vessel on the list is the Delphine class or Delphine class of submarines, medium midget submarines that entered service in 2008. Now, Delphine was a very secretive submarine project developed by Cuba. After scrapping their old Foxtrot class submarines imported from the Soviet Union, they had no submarines to defend their coastline, so they developed the Delphine as a cheap alternative. Now, Delphine is based on the North Korean Yugo class of midget medium submarines, but these were developed in 2008 for the Cuban Navy, and they were manufactured in Havana Harbor. Now, the Delphine class has a displacement of 112 to 150 tons. They are powered by one diesel-electric generator or diesel-electric engine and one separate electric engine for operating underwater. The vessel has a maximum speed of 10.8 knots, and the vessel's main armament are two 533mm Soviet-made torpedo tubes of the PT-47 class. She is also fitted with an unknown type of radar and sonar equipment, and has a crew of at least 10 to 20. Now, the number of Delphine class submarines that are in service is unknown. Some sources state that there's only one Delphine submarine that was completed, while other sources state that there's at least 4 Delphine class submarines that have been completed since 2008. The submarines have a maximum diving depth or operational depth of 100 feet. Only 1 to 4 of these have been spotted off and on. These submarines are very mysterious. There is literally only a handful of photos of the Delphine submarine. The Cubans only take these submarines out for testing or for operations very rarely, usually at night, I hear from some sources. Now, most of the photographs you do find of Delphine actually come from tourists that are visiting Cuba. Some of these tourists who come by cruise ships have taken photos of the Delphine during some of her training exercises, or their training exercises. But it wasn't until March of 2021 that Cuba finally admitted that yes, they do have their own homegrown class of submarine, the Delphine class. Now, whether or not it's just one submarine or 4, it is unclear, but there is at least one Delphine that I have seen photos of. Some sources state that there's 4 of them altogether, but at least one of them has been photographed multiple times, and Cuba has at least admitted to one and have shown at least one very clear photo of what the Delphine looks like up close, and this was published in early 2021. Now, that isn't the only class of submarine that Cuba has developed over the last decade. Starting in the early 2010s, the Cubans developed what they call the Chariot class of submersible commando vessel, also known sometimes as a manned torpedo or a manned torpedo type submarine. Now, these types of submarines were developed at the end of World War I by the Italian Navy, and they were used largely in World War II, again by the Italians, frogmen, and they were also used by the Germans at the end of World War II. One of the famous German submarines that was developed at the end of World War II was a manned torpedo-like submarine called the Biber. But they became even more popular during the Cold War, as groups like the U.S. Navy SEALs and the Soviet Navy would use some of these manned torpedo-like submarines and commando vessels during their special operations during the Cold War, for example in Vietnam. So Cuba has come late to the game, but they developed their own Chariot class of commando-type manned torpedo, which has a crew of 4, but its displacement and technical systems are not known. What is known is that the Chariot class can carry at least 1 or 2 350mm torpedoes. So it's a manned torpedo that can carry torpedoes very similar to the German and Italian manned torpedoes that were developed at the end of World War II, and many of the manned torpedoes developed by the Americans and the Soviets during the Cold War. So this was only unveiled in 2021 alongside the single clear image of the Delphine type submarine. There is one more class of, I don't even know what to call this, a submarine, a surface submarine, a torpedo boat. It is a very strange class of submarine, semi-submersible vessel that was only unveiled in 2021. This is a strange type of vessel that the Cubans call a self-propelled torpedo carrier. Now, this self-propelled torpedo carrier has no name. They haven't given a name for this vessel, but it is basically 2 semi-submersible pontoon-like submarine-type craft that have at least 1 or 2 torpedoes on these rafts. And it is fitted with an infrared camera so they can see at night, but it can also launch torpedoes. So it's like a stealth pontoon submarine torpedo craft that has been developed by the Cubans since the late 2000s. And it seems as if Cuba has at least 1 or 2 of these vessels in service. Now, these vessels largely operate at night, hence the infrared camera systems that are fitted to these vessels. And it is a semi-submersible vessel, very similar to these submarines used by the cartels, the drug cartels in South America, and South and Central America. Now, drug cartels use homemade semi-submersible craft or semi-submersible submarines that are built from existing speedboats and other sorts of watercraft. So this is basically that, but as a semi-submersible, self-propelled torpedo boat or torpedo carrier, like submarine contraption. I don't even know what to call it. It's a very goofy vessel, but the Cubans have developed this, and this is one of the weapons they've been showing off on some of their websites, as the Cuban armed forces do have their own website where they show off some of their weapon systems. And so there you have it. These were the 3 types of submarines or submersible vessels that the Cuban Navy has been working on since 2008. Now, Delphine is a very cool design. It's basically like a miniature Foxtrot class submarine, and also like the Chariot class of commando submarine. But the last vessel, the self-propelled torpedo carrier, or whatever it's called, is probably the goofiest vessel I've seen, or goofiest weapon system I've seen that has been developed by the Cubans since the end of the Cold War. So what do you all think of these Cuban submarines? These are the newest generation of Cuban submarines that have been in development since 2008. Well, which of these are your favorite? Obviously, my favorite is the Delphine, but that last one, the self-propelled torpedo carrier, is a very interesting weapon. It reminds me of like a World War I, like small torpedo boat. Wooden torpedo boat from like the First World War, or maybe like the late 19th century, like a Thornycraft torpedo boat. The British used to make wooden torpedo boats that were very tiny in the 1870s through 1890s. And this reminds me of that, except these are semi-submersible, like a submarine. So what do you all think of these? And please tell me in the comment section below. And until next time, this was J-Man Time, signing off.